is lowering interest and the loan principal just or unjust for people?
The loan principal?
In the bill, the summary of sections 109 and 110 is the government can lower the loan principal and lower the interest for people who haven't paid their mortgages. Is that just or unjust?
Well, it's unjust because it's interference with contract, and the government's supposed to protect contracts. The government should be very limited in scope and power, but one of the mandates in the Constitution is they enforce contracts. But if you have contracts, if you and I had a contract with a mortgage and a house, you don't pay your bills, I have a right to foreclose, and the government has no right to interfere in the contract. So they do a lot of that all the time around here. The contracts being violated constantly. They violate the contracts on money. The government's responsibility is to maintain value of the money, and they're always interfering. They're printing money. They're the counterfeiters. So it is the lack of understanding of the responsibility of government to enforce contracts rather than coming in and manipulating contracts and violating the principle of private property.
You have a lot of people saying, look, I'm paying my mortgage on time. Why should my taxpayer dollars fund the government to bailing out people who didn't pay their mortgage? What do you think about that?
They're exactly right. They're right morally, they're right economically, and they're right constitutionally, but they're just not right politically, because the political forces here are always to be politically correct, and you can't do anything to hurt somebody, so to speak. There's always a safety net to bail somebody out, but if there's always a safety net for doing bad behavior, guess what? You get more bad behavior, you get careless. Banks get careless, individuals get careless, and they've borrowed too much money. They borrowed 120% on their houses, and then they expect to get bailed out. That's wrong morally, and it won't solve our problems. We need to get back to the basics and liquidate our debt.
Are we in an economic crisis? Doesn't somebody have to come in and do something about this, though?
Well, what we're dealing with here is an economic crisis because they're talking about a credit crunch, but the crisis is much bigger than what they even are talking about, because they're not talking about the real crisis, and that is the bankruptcy of the whole country and the destruction of the dollar. And when we're going to bring our troops home and change our foreign policy. I mean, this is much bigger than they think it is, and yet they've scared everybody to death. They've scared people enough to bring around 57 people to change their vote, and yet they really haven't touched the problem. They knew what the problem really was about 20 years ago. They'd have quit spending money. Yet today, even in this crisis atmosphere, they're spending money like crazy. So they obviously have no idea what the problem is.